someone was like, I don't know where I am. They're like, you gotta walk over
So
here.
it's kind of crazy. But yeah, it's like I Rachel, you know how when we have con energy and I become like
Yeah.
palengkera? So
Yeah, 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 yeah.
palengkera in English is what? Like fishwife, like market fishwife. And
Something like that.
I've becoming like I'm very like ah.
Oh my
Oh no,
god.
Mahar, get off the stage now.
That just broadcasted to everyone.
Yeah.
Bashir is just like biggest laugh.
How do I whisper?
But anyway,
Someone
I
just
will
called me
go back
cow.
to my rounds. But I'll watch you guys via Twitch maybe. But thanks for being here, everyone.
Oh, there's a chat here too.
Yes,
Yes.
that as well. So if people want to send you messages, it's also possible.
Yeah. But for the questions, they can send it to everyone because if it's nearby, it's generally limited to your private space, right? So if they're in a private space of two, only their companion will see their chat. So it has to be for everyone. Unfortunately, everyone also means it goes through every single room in the venue. So
Yeah.
so it's best to ask questions via going on Spotlight. But yeah, we'll have the Twitch chat on. Let me link that to people in the announcement panel of the
So there's
chat.
like a specific thing you can like message everyone as a mod.
You can message everyone honestly, which please don't do it because I need the chat empty for for announcements.
Yeah.
Daniel, I'll keep an eye on Twitch chat just in case. So when
Thanks,
you're ready
dude.
for that, I'll have that open.
What does the Twitch chat look like? I want to see what the whole thing looks like on Twitch.
Yeah, G&G meets.
Somebody already threw it in the link. Oh, that's so cool. Look at that.
Yeah. JP Reyes and Mark Lobster made this one, so it's been super cute. You know, they're super pro at it also. And I see more people have registered in the last 10 minutes, so I will let them in. We have hit 503 registered people.
How many?
503 registered people.
Wow.
That doesn't.
And then we have about
Yeah.
130 guest lists.
So like 600 people in this entire thing.
But the access list so far is 700 people because people staff.
Oh, there's Mia. I'm just seeing all the different.
Is me out there? Oh, I see it. I see him.
Okay. So I'm gonna get off stage because yeah. But otherwise, we are starting in 7 minutes. I'm so excited. Okay, so I'm also streaming this in real life. So see y'all in a bit.
See y'all in a bit.
Also, I did this stupid thing. I went on the Twitch, and then I'm like, why am I not moving? Oh, because I'm not on the gather window, idiot.
I had the same problem.
We should.
I'm getting really emotional about this. I don't know about y'all, but like, this is like bringing me some sweet con vibes, and it's hitting me.
See, I feel the exact same. Like for me, I was like, okay, when I go back to cons, I'm just gonna be hella awkward because I haven't interacted with people in person in a very long time, and I get that vibe right here. I'm like, oh my god, we've been streaming a lot and everything, but they're like people here, and it's kind of like we're in the same physical space, but we're not. Like this is really cool.
Yeah. The thing that I didn't think I would miss, but actually now that we're doing it here, I miss like the accidental just talking to people. I love just kind of stumbling in and just like, who are these people? They're all amazing. They're so talented, and everyone's so friendly and just like wanting to bring me into like their conversation. And if I'm not jiving with it, I can just be like, you know what? I have something else to do, but it was great. It was great meeting you all. Have a great con.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's. I was like walking along the like the booths, and I'd be like, oh, it's just like at a con, just like looking at everybody's booths, looking at what they have, and like this is the future. This is the future, and it's so cool.
Yeah, I'm very big into kind of. I actually didn't share this tonight when we were doing our stream, but this entire thing has happened. 2020. It has really opened my eyes to like accessibility and kind of ways you can make these spaces more welcoming to everyone, giving them the tools they need to really engage in ways that make them comfortable and feel safe. And just my mind has been blown. Like, hold your brain, y'all. Like, there's so much more we can do. And this is, there's so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy that, you know, this all started from an idea that Agatha and I came up with at a bubble tea place, and now we're doing all of this crazy stuff, and the industry itself has changed so dramatically.
Yeah, from that time. It's really different now in an amazing way.
Yeah,
awesome way.
I feel like even before we started, there was nobody like in the North American scene in our little bubble was talking about, like, you know, Orientalism in TTRPGs. Nobody was like talking about like Karatur and Al-Qadim and all these different things. There was no discussion happening. And I mean,
yeah,
but you know, like everyone was on Google Plus as well, which is like,
oh,
wow.
That's true.
Everyone was on
Rip,
Google Plus. Rip. But yeah, it's crazy what has happened in the industry, and it's inspiring how everyone has kind of adapted to staying connected, you know, during this pandemic. And the fact that, you know, we're able to talk to other people who are like literally on the other side of the planet is just so cool. Like, I'm looking at Mahar right now because Mahar's setup is so beautiful, and I see daylight, and I'm like, this is insane. Like, and like, yeah, like video conferencing is always going to be a thing, and it has been a thing with us for a long time. But the fact that we're doing this in a convention and we're sitting at a table, Agatha, your cats are on the table. Like, they're literally on the table. This is so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I do expect you to bring a cat on screen, like #show cat, at some point in the night. No, you're shaking your head. No, it's not happening.
Nah, they have their own room that they go to when it's nighttime.
Gotcha. Okay, never mind. The time has passed. I should have asked for show cat much earlier in the day.
That's right.
Okay, lesson learned. I appreciate it.
Lesson learned.
That's why the cats are here. Also, shout out to, I think who?
I think it was Rachel.
Rachel, yeah.
Rachel did it?
Yeah, shout out to Rachel for making these two awesome cats.
Rachel's going to confirm whether or not it was them who did it.
Sorry, I wasn't I went to get tea. The cats were made by Stacy, as was the rest of this map.
Sorry, Stacy. Shout out to Stacy.
But I think she's not here in this room. No, she's not here.
Okay, well, if you run into Stacy at this con,
yeah.
Kudos to Stacy.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what I learned? You know what was really cool? I was talking to a whole bunch of people, and I was like, I'm looking for Agatha. They were like, you know, you could use the find feature, and I could literally click on you, Agatha, and it literally drew like a line on the floor. So and then it auto walked me to you.
Yeah. Mahar also taught me how to do that so that we could track down Steve. I mean, if we weren't following you or anything.
Like, Steve, if you go to like
100%.
any of the guest list right now and you click on them, like Sangjin's at the top of mine, and you select locate, it will locate that person. And then if you select follow, it will walk you automatically to them.
No way. That's wild. Because when it comes to cons in real life, you would see me running around, be like, have you seen person?
Yeah. Or it's like texting somebody.
Yep.
Yeah.
But now.
Technology. Okay, everyone, it's 1 minute to formally starting your panel. Okay, so just welcome to the Asians Represent Live, where we have Daniel, Steve, and Agatha from Asians Represent, where they're going to dive into creating content in the TTRPG space, from podcasts to streams to building your social media brand, and they'll cover it all by sharing their experiences in the industry. This is going to be a panel for an hour and a half. It's going to be unmoderated because these are experts in their field. You can ask questions later on either here on Gather, you can come to this podium where I am at, or you can ask questions on Twitch. All right, everyone, the show is yours, and we're so glad to have you.
Heck yeah.
Good script. Good job, Mahar.
Did you write that, Mahar? We can't hear Bahar. We can't hear Bahar.
Stage anymore.
You know what? That's
once,
the one.
Bahar
yes.
didn't just write it. She crafted it.
Oh yes.
Crafted it. Wordsmith. That's a hey everyone. Welcome to Asians Represent Live. We're a little rusty, so this is our first con appearance in a very long time. You know what, Steve? I think this is also your first con appearance with Asians Represent.
Yeah,
that's correct. This is my debut, y'all.
Because this was supposed to happen last March at Breakout Con, the con where we met you.
Yes.
In real life.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have repeated the cycle of us meeting somebody at a con, us adding someone to Asians Represent at the con, and then the following year doing a panel with that person at the con. It's what happened with Amar. It's what happened with you. But you know what? It's tradition at this point. And by 2030, Asians Represent is going to be huge. You know what? Honestly, we should talk about what we're doing with Asians Represent and what we're going to be doing with it in the future. But I think we should first introduce ourselves, what Asians Represent is, because I don't think we should assume that folks in here know what Asians Represent is. So hey, I'm Daniel. I'm one of the co-founders of Asians Represent. I am the chief creative officer. Asians Represent, started as a podcast. And now it's kind of evolved into something more. It's evolved into a multimedia collective of individuals who, seek to introduce new perspectives into tabletop gaming, create spaces for new voices, and of course, create conversation and highlight creators and uplift others. But that's me. I'm Daniel. I'm a designer, retired archaeologist, and I guess the producer of Asians Represent. Let's go next to me. I guess I don't know if people see me on screen, but the snow person next to me with the cats.
Oh yes. Hi everyone. I am the snow person with the cats. My name is Agatha. My pronouns are she, her, and I am also one of the co-founders of Asians Represent. The funny thing about Asians Represent is this idea of this germinator when I was talking to someone. I was listening to another podcast where people were discussing I don't remember which game it was, but it was a game set in some kind of a pan-Asian setting. And I was like, oh, I wish there was at least one Asian person on here talking about this. I just want to hear it. And I was telling someone else about it. And then she was like, okay, why don't you make that podcast? And I was like, I don't know how to do podcasts. So I have a lot of experience about how to go from not knowing anything to getting other people to join you and bring their skills to the table. So yeah, I am co-founder. I'm also a co-host of the podcast, Asians Represent podcast. And then now we do Twitch shows, the wrap up, which we do on Fridays, or I guess would it be
Saturdays this time.
Saturdays, yeah, and it would be way early. So I don't know if anyone in Southeast Asia would want to catch it live. But anyway, and I am also a game writer. I am a cultural consultant, and also a sensitivity reader. And sometimes I do translation as well, from English to Chinese or Chinese to English. And now, to the next person. I also LARP. So if you want to LARP, hit me up. To the person in the cosplay.
I get the cosplay. Before things changed drastically, for my birthday, I had rented a venue, hired a designer to make a custom LARP for me and 29 of my other friends.
What?
It was going to be a custom LARP where it was a winery. We were going to pretend the winery was a space station. We were going to be space senators, political figures.
Oh my gosh.
I had planned all of the food and everything like that for my birthday because whatever. And I had hired someone to do a custom game for me, for all my friends to live in this for 3 hours. And at the end of it, we would just That's it. It's done.
I thought you were gonna say at the end of it, I was gonna scream, "I am the Senate," and then it would be over.
That's a
But no, I
very
guess not.
specific thing that I wanted, yes, and it was going to be a secret. But thanks, Daniel.
Oh,
for
I'm
that.
sorry, Steve. I'm sorry.
Well,
I
anyways,
don't- Are any of the 29 people that you had originally invited in this con right now?
maybe,
Oh,
but
okay.
but that guest
Sorry.
list will also change because now, since joining Asians Represent in the last 2 years, has it been 2 years? 1.5 years, I guess. I've met so many new people and so many new friends and colleagues and people who I truly trust. So everyone who's tuning in, my name is Steve Wen. I am a Vietnamese Canadian who's joined Asian Represent as one of the cast members. I actually first listened to Asian Represent while I was on Twitter, and someone was like, "Steve, you seem to be really interested in like Asian representation. Have you heard of Asian Represent?" And I was like, "No, but I feel like I should have." And I tuned in, and it was right around the time where of course, Daniel, Agatha, and Amar were talking about very in-depth topics, but they had just started their Masks actual play. And I had never seen an all-Asian cast do an actual play on a podcast format. And I generally don't like actual plays, but this one really hooked me in because of the world building, kind of like, here are these Asian voices, we're building a world together, and then we're going to build characters and play in it and tell our own stories. And I was like, I'm super in. I'm in my cosplay for Daniel's character, Tommy Moon, from this six episodes?
Six episodes. Yeah.
Masks actual play. And just like I was super in. And I just feel very, very happy to have met these fine folks and be part of this. Some of the work that I do with Asians Represent, Daniel and I, we started up the Asians Read together, where we critically read Oriental Adventures, and then we grabbed some more very talented folks, both within and without the tabletop RPG space, and we critically read Legends of the Five Rings as well. And we did it all live, and it was a very I'm not going to say easy, or I'm not going to say difficult, but it was a growth opportunity for all of us, and it was I learned a lot from that. But yeah,
it was definitely a great. You know what, Steve? It's really funny that you bring up Masks, because I remember exactly when we came into contact on Twitter, because we put that out. Magpie Games was like, "Hey, we'll sponsor you," and you said, "I just bought a copy of Masks after listening to this show." And I remember clicking on your profile and being like, "Oh, a cosplayer. Oh, in Toronto. I wonder if we'll cross paths."
Oh, that's so cute.
Because I remember you. And then I was like, I wonder if we'll cross paths. And then we met at Breakout Con in 2019.
Yep.
Which would have been like March 2019. And you were the only person at the con who was cosplaying. And you got in trouble with security because you had fake guns.
Yep.
And yeah, I just loved that, like we're talking about like con energy. I just loved your con energy. And I remember on May 17th I'm looking at it right now, 7:12 p.m. I messaged you and was like, "Hey, do you want to collaborate?" And so May 17th of this year, Steve, is going to be our 2-year collaboration anniversary.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Cute.
That's powerful. That's powerful.
Yeah. And Agatha, you mentioned like a podcast that you were listening to. Like, I remember what podcast that was too. It's Fear of a Black Dragon, the Gauntlet. And they were doing a read through of Yoon Soon.
Wow.
And they were talking about it. And then you messaged me and you were like, "Hey, Rach, shout out to Plus One Forward podcast, was like, mentioned that you know about podcasting. I just want to do it." You said I want to do an Asian thing in TTRPGs, but I don't know what. All you said was, "I want to do an Asian thing where we talk to people." And I was like, "Okay, you know what? Let's go get lunch. Let's go get bubble tea, and let's talk."
We didn't get lunch. We only got bubble tea.
But we only got bubble tea.
The more important thing.
And we sat down and we basically said, "Okay, I know how to make a podcast. I know how to edit. I know how to do all this stuff."
Yeah, because you were already doing a podcast at that time.
Yeah, I was already doing a podcast that actually goes offline soon. But yeah, I was doing a podcast called Curiosity in Focus, and I didn't have direction there. And I think that's something we're going to talk about with this panel. It's like creating in this space, specifically with like media and like programming. And so I said, I want to do something in gaming. And you were like, it's got to be Asians. And we both were like, okay, only Asian people can be on this show. Because, I mean, that sends a very important message out there.
Well, first of all, we were like, what should we call ourselves?
Oh, yeah.
And we had some subpar choices.
We're not good at making up names. So let's just put it like that. We're not good at making up names.
I'm really proud of Asians Represent. I came up with that one.
I like it. It's powerful.
Thank you. And it's also very like that's what we're about. Asians representing.
It's true.
And because of that, it's actually, I feel like that really helped us define our branding and our vision and our purpose and from that we were like, okay, only Asians. And that came up in discussion quite a few times actually when we were like, oh, like I think specifically you, Daniel, because you know a lot of people who are very informed in specific subjects because of your academic background, and then you wanted to bring them on, which makes sense because they would know what they're talking about, but we had to say no to that because of what we're about, which is again uplifting Asian voices and giving that specific perspective.
Yeah, we had to say no to so many people.
And they're awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? It's we're talking about the name like Asians Represent. And I think a big thing there is like when we write Asians Represent, it's got that exclamation mark. And like, I think one thing that we set out to do really early with the podcast was try to be really loud. And I think we've been doing a much better job of that as we've, kind of progressed into this industry. I think since we started Asians Represent, like we both worked on a lot of games. Like a lot has changed for us professionally since we started the podcast. And I very much think I am certain it's because of the podcast. And I think one thing that we were very clear about from day one was that this podcast wasn't going to be about us, and we were going to try to bring as many people as possible. And I think we have definitely stayed true to that, like especially given our tradition of literally picking up a new crew member at a con every year. But like, I think one of the things that we need to do, and one of the things I'm excited about with this panel, is how we are going to try to tell other people like what we did with Asians Represent, our goal with Asians Represent, and what they can do. Because I think what's really important about Asians Represent, and I don't say about us, I say about like what we're doing and what our community is doing. Because there are so many people who are in the audience right now who are like putting their work out there, like Mahar, like, cause I'm just looking right at the screen right now. Like Mahar is like constantly on their grind, just like putting out new content. Like I'm looking into the audience and I see like Mia Mercury is like, I remember when Mia started posting stuff on Twitter, and now they're just doing their art style has evolved like crazy. It's insane how awesome everything is. And I think the coolest thing about this is that we get to see the community grow and become louder. Like Asian creators were always there. Like we've always been here. We've always been interested in TTRPGs, but we've never felt empowered to talk about racism in the industry, call out companies like Wizards of the Coast. We've never felt empowered to, put on our own shows, right? We first started out as a podcast where we were just interviewing local people. It was literally like you and I in my dining room talking about Orientalism for episode 1, and then inviting Derek Chung of Emberwind, like to come to my condo and talk. We did a couple of remote episodes that kind of worked, but it's always kind of been in person. And I think things really changed. I think there were a couple of moments in Asians Represent that really changed everything. And I would love to know what parts of our journey, you felt have been the most impactful, to you individually. For me, like one of them was going to Metatopia for the first time. And I remember going to Metatopia and literally like just bringing like a mic with me and recording episodes of Asians Represent there. And, it's where I met Mendez. It's where I met Miriam, who we could collaborate with a lot. And it's where I realized that there are so many indie creators, and that we at Asians Represent had a platform that people trusted, that people valued and respected. And it's in that moment that I felt like we weren't doing enough. I felt like we weren't spotlighting as many people as we possibly could. We weren't, uplifting as many people as we possibly could. And so, Metatopia changed things for me. And I think since then we've been trying to innovate, we've been trying to do things that, could involve as many people as possible. So I'm super curious, for you two, as what have been your moments as, part of Asians Represent, from that first Twitter exchange that you and I had, Steve, literally, which consisted of, I didn't realize I wasn't following you. If I told you we were planning a D&D series with an all Asian cast, would you be interested in joining? And then responding with 2 messages. Fuck yes. Fuck yes. And that's how it all started. But I would just love to know, from both of your perspectives, what was your moment? What changed things for you along this journey?
Yeah, I'll go here. So my story is kind of not fully not fully understanding and being able to deconstruct, how I felt about these issues and whatnot. And Agatha and Daniel and the rest of the crew really did a lot of work to help me find my own voice in that, if that kind of makes sense. And that was really helpful. And talking to Daniel, Agatha, talking to you, and listening, it kind of gave me the strength to go into other areas and be parts of streams and whatnot. I had some experience producing my own actual play Dungeons and Dragons stream, really, really small, never got much traction, but that's okay. We did it for fun. And then I joined some other things, and I was streaming suddenly for charity and doing this work and getting my face out there. And a big reason, and Agatha, this is actually that name, Asian Represent, for me as a listener, was kind of like a call to action. And I don't know if you ever meant it to be that way, but it was kind of I heard that and it resonated with me. And I was like, yeah, Asians should represent. I should represent. I should push, and I should follow kind of what I feel is right. And so I did. And that kind of built up this whole thing for me, where I was building up this confidence and building up these skills until finally, Daniel was like, let's do an actual play, and I'd love you to be there. And then we had our session 0, where I wasn't really sure what to expect, but as soon as I sat down at the table, the energy was different than any other table I'd ever been at. We were talking about this fantasy China, basically, and I was like, this is something completely new and novel to me, and I like it, and I really want to keep digging into this, because this is hitting me in a place that is very personal to me, that I can't fully describe, but I know I want to keep doing this. And what it had done was really kind of opened me up to having future conversations. And now I'm at a place where, I'm on Twitter, or I'm on other panels, or I'm on every Friday with you fine folks talking about these things. And I feel like finally my voice is at it's at a volume that I really, really like, knowing that I can be louder. And that is a great place for me to be at today.
Yeah, for me, I don't think I can pinpoint a specific point where it is more drastic of a change, because all of this is very, it's always a little challenging for me. I actually had a lot of conversations before starting a podcast where I didn't want to really involve. I didn't want to be on Twitter and engage in a lot of conversations. I didn't really want to put my opinions out there necessarily, because I just don't enjoy being in the public with opinions or whatnot. So all of this has been pretty hard for me, I would say, and also a learning experience in a lot of and so everything is kind of a challenge, but everything is also an exciting new opportunity. So like starting the podcast, which was really made possible with Daniel's expertise. And I think meeting all of the different people through this, it has been continuously humbling and also just really cool. Like running the masks, the short campaign for the podcast. So like starting our first actual play, it was really stressful for it was really nerve-wracking because I was like, I need to do this and then it's going to go out there, everyone's gonna listen to it. But it was cool. It was cool to collaborate with the people that I trust and that I know have amazing ideas. And it's so that was kind of like a whoa, we're creating something and collabing with like, or like, being sponsored by materials from Magpie. That was cool. And then really getting into the D&D world with Dungeons and Asians, that was another thing. And then like, I think with the whole Discord and then when I finally joined, so this is all like personally, my own personal journey, because the Discord was started by Pam. Shout out to Pam and Daniel and Steve. They were the ones that really did a lot of the work to build the infrastructure. And then I joined in later as a mod and so on. And that was really cool too, to interact with another part of the community that I wasn't really doing that with before. And then joining Twitter and engaging with the discourse more. So all of this for me is a gradual process to slowly inch my way into the world and to feel comfortable enough to share what I think with everyone else, and then also listen to what everyone else is saying, because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts and I love listening to other people's opinions, but sharing is a little more difficult.
Yeah. You know what? I think like, I know there are a lot of creators out here, a lot of game designers who, want to like not only make a living off of this stuff, but also really like share their true selves with the world. I think one thing that we recognize as a big responsibility in Asians Represent is that, we like our show is both a mirror and a window into Asian culture, and not Asian culture as a monolith, but various Asian cultures. I realized that our podcast initially was this like window into our experiences that people could listen to, but it wasn't until we started doing the actual play and then we started streaming on Twitch that I realized that like Asians Represent is very much a mirror that some people needed. Like you said, Steve, you said like I felt seen, right? There are no all Asian actual plays in North America, or no big ones, or no big all Asian like Twitch streamers or anything like that. And I'm not saying we're big or anything, but I think what's so important is that like we are taking what little influence we have very seriously, and we recognize that for many people, Asians Represent is a window into Asian culture and the Asian experience in the tabletop gaming industry. But it's also like a mirror for others, where we are producing content that has helped people feel seen, yes, or has inspired people to make their own content. And I take that very, very seriously.
And not for granted, yeah.
And certainly not for granted. I think, with Asians Represent, we've been very purposeful with how we're evolving. Like we haven't set up a Patreon yet. We haven't done anything like that. And that's all by design. I know that there are a lot of people who create a podcast or start a YouTube channel or start a Twitch channel and want to put out an actual play, and they might fizzle out, or you might get burnt out. And so what I think would be great for us to all share, I know, Agatha, you've been streaming with us far less. And so like knowing that, but what I would love for us to share is just like how we've kept this growing, how we've kept this sustainable, because we have been doing Asians Represent for almost 3 years. We've been doing it for almost 3 years. And of course, we've been doing it at a much higher frequency during the quarantine, right? Steve and I started streaming on Twitch. We started putting out a podcast and Dungeons and Asians every month. We have like our Karatur read through, our Al Qadim read through, and then, our charity streams and all of our one shots. Go ahead, Agatha. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, that's a question that I think would be best posed towards you, Daniel. But before that, I kind of want to talk about, like, before we really get into the, like, how do you evolve as like a media endeavor? I guess is one way to call this. But before that, like, I think there were a couple of things that, I mean, there was definitely the timing that really worked out for us in the beginning to start with. And then also, I think there are certain elements that made it work for us to really hit the ground running. And I kind of wanted to touch on that first, in case anyone was curious about, like, oh, I have ideas, like, I want to start podcast streaming, whatever it is, like, but how do I really, like, push it through the initial kind of, like, thing and not sputter out right away? And I think for us, one thing is you have to find a niche, and find a niche that is like that has not been filled yet is better to do that than to find what that has. Because, for example, if you're doing actual plays, or if you're doing like a podcast, like, there are a lot of them and more are coming out all the time, right? Even in such a small hobby as ours, it's growing. And so I think it's very important to find what people can be interested in, and also what isn't necessarily being done yet. So, like, again, shout out to Rach Shelkey, their podcast, Plus One Forward. That one is specifically about only Powered by the Apocalypse games. And they've also evolved over the years to do outside belonging games and stuff, which is an evolution of that. But that is a very specific niche that was not being filled, and then they filled it, and therefore they can keep going with that, and because people will be looking for this particular thing, and then they are the only ones that can supply that, right? So for us, it was Asian representation, Asian voices. Like, if people want to know about like, oh, is this a racist thing? Is this a racist thing that talks about this? They go to Asians Read, right? Like, it's become a thing. Like, it's like, oh, if you have a question, you can come and watch this, right? And that, I mean, that's not like how our vision was to start with, but it is the niche that we are filling. And that is also why we can keep growing in this direction, because there's no one else doing it.
Yeah, we're literally like, we couldn't be first in the category of podcast talk show. We couldn't be first in the category of actual play. So what we did was we set up a brand new category for ourselves.
Yes.
We're like, let's talk about Asian representation in tabletop gaming. It seemed super niche and super specific, but look what happened.
Yeah. So I think finding a very specific niche is good. And then another thing is, for us, it was actually very helpful, for me at least, in the very beginning, was we pitched to a network, right? We pitched to the One Shot Network. Daniel, you like messaged James.
It's a Facebook message.
Yeah, on Facebook while we were sitting in that bubble tea shop, and we were like, we want to do this. Can we join you? And he said yes. He is great. James is great. And I think the fact that our show was advertised on the other shows that were pretty popular was very helpful for us too, right? Like, that helped us get that initial like name out there, and just even some listenership. And I think that is a good thing to do. Like, if you think you have a good idea, like, you should pitch to people, and then get get advice, get feedback, or also see if you can join them, because that's a really good way to, first of all, not be in your own echo chamber. Like if you think this is a good idea, but you don't know if it is or not, feedback from other people is often a very good way to know, right? Like if they're like, sorry, we're not interested, then you're like, oh, okay, maybe this network isn't a good fit, but also maybe I can like sharpen my idea. So Steve, you have...
I have pensive look. Was that what you're calling out?
Yeah, or yeah, I wasn't sure if you had something that you wanted to say.
I have questions because, now that I've kind of joined the community and this team here, I also get questions like, how do I go about filling niches and like making sure it's going to be a success? And one thing a question I've always had for actually the two of you was, I know you picked One Shot Network, and I'm sure there was like a lot of thought and emotion that went into that choice. So how did you go about approaching that question about who to network with, and like what kind of things were going through your head to make sure that this was the right choice to make?
Yeah, so we picked the One Shot Network because I had actually met James at BreakoutCon. We have made it very clear that we will only align ourselves with people who share the same values as us. I think when we were building this, when we were setting things up, we had to figure out, we had to set really, really specific goals for ourselves. We had to set specific goals. We had to set achievable goals. And we had to set goals that were relevant to our interests, right? Specific and relevant goals were really important to us because they were literally the driving forces in the early stages of Asians Represent. Like, how can Agatha and I, develop on-air chemistry that people would vibe with?
I think to answer this question, Daniel, do you remember, were the Broadswords on One Shot already when we joined, or did they join after?
So the Broadswords were on shortly after we joined. So what happened was we joined the network and we did the announcement at Gen Con 2018. So August 2018 is when you weren't able to go. And
Yeah.
I went and I sat up at this panel. I remember the exact room too. And we announced the show. And it's actually at that con where I met Jade as well.
Right.
And we met the Broadswords after because they had joined One Shot from another network.
Okay. So I think the reason why for me, I mean, it was one of the reasons was because, Daniel, you were like, I know James, I met him, and it seems like he would be a good person to, like, he seems like a solid person and would vibe with what we want to do with the podcast. And then also, like, I was listening to some of the podcasts from One Shot, and just, I mean, is this a very vague way of putting it? Yes, it was like a vibe check, like where there was a lot of different kinds of voices that were on those podcasts. So that was a nice thing for me to flag, because we really care about like diversity and representation for our specific purpose, and also what we want in general, right, to join. And that we got that personally from One Shot. Also, One Shot is a really big podcast. That was also a consideration for us, right? Like, we want to be able to have access to
their audience.
Yeah. So I think those were, the two things that were more important for me personally.
Yeah. And I mean, like, when, not everyone has a personal connection to somebody who runs a network. And so I know that there are going to be people who are like, well, okay, well, what if I don't have that connection? I mean, first things first, you always got to sit down and ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting out an actual play? Am I putting out an actual play because I want to be Critical Role? Very unlikely to be the case, because Critical Role already owns the category of D&D actual plays. So why are you doing this? Are you doing this because you want to tell your stories? Are you doing this because, you have a very, specific niche that you want to fill? If that's the case, and you could answer that question, why? And it's the same question that we always talk about when people create Asian content and they ask me if that's racist, right? It's like, oh, hey, I'm not Asian, but I want to create this thing. Should I do it? And, we always ask, why do you want to do it? And very frequently it's either like, I married someone who's Asian, or I spent a summer in Asia and I love it.
Mhm.
And I always ask them, so do you feel like that why is meaningful enough for you to do this with the utmost respect? And do you think that people will also recognize that in the product that you're making? And it's the same thing for game designers, artists, or podcasters, which is really what we could talk about, podcasting and streaming, right? And for us, it's always been, we have been very clear about our values. We value representation, we value empowerment, and we value, education. And so anyone that we've aligned with have also held those values or respected those values. So if you're out there and you're a creator and you want to do this, you have to think very carefully about what your values are leading into launching something like this, right? Like, what makes you different, but also what are you looking for in a collaborator? And that's how we were able to add Amar. That's how we were able to add Jade. That's how we were able to add Steve. That's how we were able to, trust Pam in helping us set up the Discord server, because all of these people aligned with our values. And all of these people were also people that we respect and we can learn from. Like each and every person that we've brought on to Asians Represent, from our Discord moderators to the admins, to the guests, to the crew, everything have all been people who we feel uplift us and we want to uplift. They share our values, and that's what's kept Asians Represent going.
And now to answer the question about evolving with the times, evolving to stay relevant, evolving because of just the circumstances. Daniel, you already touched on quite a few of those, like once COVID hit and we all can no longer record in person, then this really forced us to try doing streaming or recording online. Even that was a big step for us. That
was a huge step for us.
Yeah, and then you two doing the Asians Read. So this is my question, actually, to Steve and Daniel. So what could have prompted you to do the stream, right? Like to really step away from just doing a podcasting to a streaming thing?
Steve, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
I apologize. I actually want to go back one step to something Agatha and you and Daniel said, and I want to draw a line there because that's how my brain kind of works. And Daniel, you were talking about picking a network with the idea of aligning with values, and Agatha, you mentioned basically vibe check.
Yeah.
And I actually want to draw a direct line between the two of those because I feel like both of those hand in hand are what I think most people need to have, to make good, safe decisions. I think each of those on their own exposes you to a little bit of weakness. And I don't know who's out there listening, but for me, particularly, I went through a process of figuring out how do I feel about my own safety doing these things, especially considering, and we'll get into this, when we started live streaming Origins Adventures and kind of the hate and the vitriol that came out of online discourse. And I began really considering, how do I make better decisions? Not that it was a wrong decision, but how do I make decisions in the future that'll protect myself? And I think both knowing what your values are so that you can make sure that projects align with those, but also trusting in your gut. Because there have definitely been podcasts or streams where my gut said, although the values align, my gut said, I think this is going to be a one-time thing for charity, and then I'm not going to continue with this because I just don't feel like it's something I want to continue with. And I trusted in that, and I think that was very, very powerful for me, and it helped me a lot.
Yeah,
So,
I think values and gut check you're right, Steve, they're totally different things.
Yeah.
Right, totally different things. Sorry, Agatha, what was your question again? It was
the question was why the hell did we do Asians Read?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So
sorry, no, Agatha, go ahead.
How did you decide to make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, a part of it was I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if I've ever said this. Part of it was like I miss Steve. Part of it was I miss
Yeah.
Steve.
I feel that.
But like in all seriousness, like Jade was the one who kind of planted that seed, right? I was talking at the beginning. I was talking about how Asians Represent was very much a window into our experiences and the experiences of the people we had on the podcast. But we could never be that mirror for Asian people and with the guests we had on until we were actually on camera. And so in order to evolve, we had to be both that window and that mirror. And by we, I mean the brand of Asians Represent. So that's kind of what started. Like A was like, Daniel's missing Steve and wants to talk to Steve. But also like, how do we have a greater impact? I think, when you're looking at social media strategy and you're looking at growing a brand, you have to think about a couple of things, right? Like people aren't like buying. In this case, buying is engaging with us. People aren't buying what we do. They aren't engaging with us because we're on Twitch. They're not engaging with us because we have a podcast that's on iTunes or Spotify or whatever. People are buying into why we are doing this, right? It's not what we're doing, it's why we're doing it, right? And so again, it goes back to values. We started the Twitch because we wanted to create another platform or extend our platform so that we could be that mirror, so that people could feel seen. But we also wanted to, again, one of our values, engage in conversation and create conversation. And Twitch was the natural step for us, given the nature of COVID. I think it was always on our radar, but COVID kind of sped things up. It's the same thing with Discord, right? We were creating conversation on Twitch, but then realizing that we had an international following, and Discord was a way for us to do that. And we happened to, we knew someone, Pam, who aligned with our values and why we do Asians Represent. And so we made that happen. I think a thing with like evolving Asians Represent, taking it further and why we did it. Look, I mean, if you're looking at your social media strategy, you're going to have like paid social media, and that's going to be your advertising. You're going to have your community management. So that's our ability to track conversations and see what's happening in the space. You're going to have organic content, which is what we are actually producing. And then you're going to have reactive power, right? And we only had one of those four things. We only had one of those four things, and it was organic content. It was the podcast that we were making. We really didn't have community management. We didn't have a way to track conversations around our content unless people were tweeting about it. So Twitch was a way for us to manage conversations and track them because we were having them live with people while we were actually producing that organic content. And in setting up that community and expanding our community to a live space and creating live organic content, we then created something that, that was basically reactive power. And that was our Twitch stream, and that was our YouTube channel. So once we set up the YouTube channel, and once we started like literally documenting and archiving all of the conversations we were having, we had an easy way for people to insert the Asians Represent brand into conversation. And by brand, I mean the Asians Represent values, right? The conversations we were having with people on Twitch, right? All documented there. So when people are saying, hey, Oriental Adventures, this is a really harmful book, and people ask why, explain to me, do that, intellectual and emotional labor for me right here at 240 characters. We have that content here, and we have that reactive power where people can actually say, hey, look, there's this thing. So that goes all the way back to that niche, right? If we couldn't be first in the Twitch talk show category, we had to create a new category for ourselves. And that was critically reading and having these conversations. Sorry, your turn, Steve.
My answer is completely different.
Yeah,
it's completely different.
No, go for it. And that's how it should be, right?
So the way it worked was, I obviously missed talking to everyone because we had started Dungeons & Asians, and I was feeling like some like really deep connections and bonds. We I don't know if you remember, but like we had done the the infamous episode with the Empress and Lenning, and then we had gone to some more deep, emotional kind of like traveling stuff. We had talked a lot about our characters and how they interact with travel and what travel means to them. And I've said it before in other things, but the way people travel talks to their identity. And I began like really discovering our characters and also discovering a little bit of the players. And I thought that was really magical, and I missed it. So when Daniel approached me and was like, "Hey, let's read Orion's Adventures," my gut reaction was like, "Fuck that! I don't want that." But after I didn't send that message. But what I did do was I thought about it and I was like, this is a great opportunity for me to continue with my own personal values. And at the moment in time, I was not even thinking about Asians Represent. I was like, what do I want out of this? And what I wanted was to speak my mind about Asian representation and the harm that I've seen with Orientalist tropes. And this was a perfect opportunity for it. And Daniel, we've had side conversations about this, but here I'll speak very explicitly that when we had done this, in my mind, I was always like, if this is not going the way I want it to, 100% I can pull the plug and be like, Daniel, this is a great opportunity, but this is not something I want to pursue. So in my mind, I was always like, this is going to be a fail fast situation. If it doesn't work out, I will count it as a failure. I will take my learnings and we'll continue on somewhere else. And Daniel, I think I got some vibes from you that if this didn't work out, that was okay. Like we could take the learning and like try something else. And I was excited for that too. But it just so happened that the stream itself was very, very impactful. And that I think flows into your points where you were saying you put a lot of effort and thought into it, and 100% it paid off. So I am forever thankful that, you know, you and I were able to partner in that kind of endeavor, because we made something very, very special, very unique, and something that I'm personally very proud of, even though I think it's imperfect.
Oh, it's certainly imperfect, but I think for the people who stuck around, right, that community, the people who joined that conversation with a growth mindset, they saw us change. I mean, if you watch the wrap up today and compare it to like the first ever stream we did of Oriental Adventures, you and I, like Steve, appear as two completely different people.
Yeah.
Two completely different people who are far more measured in their approaches, far more willing to disagree, right? And far more confident, right? Again, like, you and I definitely like have talked about that plug, right? And you said like, my values were different from Asians, like our values were different, but really they were the same, right? Because that's why this worked out, right? You were doing it for yourself, but the reasons you were doing it for yourself aligned in the reasons that I wanted to do this for the brand. And I think what we also need to be clear about is that Asians Represent, and I say this as a brand, Asians Represent is a company. Like we are incorporated in Canada. We have a board of directors. It's me, Agatha, and Amar.
And Jade.
And Jade, sorry. I'm so late. It's me, Agatha, Amar. It's me, Agatha, Amar, and Jade. And we have been, thanks to Amar, bless Amar. Thanks to Amar, we have been running this as like, like a tight-knit crew.
Yeah.
We have our board meetings, meeting minutes, everything is done by the book. And Steve, like I've had this conversation with you as well. Like our board of directors, we have a rule, and Amar is our tiebreaker until we get an odd number. And that offer to join like the Asians Represent board as a stakeholder, as a shareholder, is always open to you. And I've continuously reinforced this, but also knowing that it is okay if you say no, and you have said no multiple times because you want the ability to peace if you feel like it. And I respect that, right? And that's how we've been able to continuously collaborate and produce new content, because we have a mutual understanding of each other's values and what we want out of this and how we can react when these values aren't being met. Right?
So,
it's super
sorry,
important. No, that's
a
it.
great point that I really want to hop on, which is about the structure. Oh,
Mahar's going to say something.
okay.
Non-moderator You're on mute.
Non-moderator Mahar, you're on mute.
You need to come on stage.
I
You
love
think
that orchid. That orchid is gorgeous.
I
By,
know,
by
it looks
Mahar.
really good. Or come to the podium.
Or come to the podium.
Okay, well,
Go
anyway,
ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
what is super important that you brought up, Daniel, is the fact, yes, the whole internal structure that has been set up. We went through a whole rebranding thing, and
Thanks to Steve as well for that.
yeah, that is something that I have had no experience with before as well, and it is so helpful in realigning what we want. And because we were going through so many changes, it was so good for us to really set things up so that, like Daniel said, we can react to any situation from our like brand manual to know like, okay, but what do we actually care about? Let's refer back to the text that we all agreed on. And I think, and then having like a delegation of like roles. So Daniel said that you're the chief content officer, and I'm the and I don't know if I said this, but I'm the chief community officer. And I think also having these things more clearly delegated is super useful once you're growing as an organization. And this is like the not sexy part of a growing group, but it's so important.
I mean, I think internal organizational structure is sexy, but
oh, sorry. Like, I mean, so that's why I need all of you, because I don't think.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point. It's like, even if you're going to get together with a group of friends to produce an actual play, I think it's very clear that you set expectations as to, what you're going to do. And I love how Steve said this. It's, you have to set expectations and have a mutual understanding as to what you're going to do when you fail, right? And again, fail, first attempt in learning. Okay. When you fail and when you succeed. So what do you do when things don't go the way you want it? And what do you do when things kind of blow up, which is what happened with us? And our reaction to, getting that Annie and getting all that attention was to immediately sit down, reevaluate what we're all about, make sure we're aligned, and have a clear delegation of responsibilities. And that has helped us grow. That has helped us, collaborate with one another. I know that if we have like an organizational thing, we just go straight to Amar. I know that if there's a thing on the Discord that needs like an Asians represent like shareholder involved, Agatha's going to take care of that right away. Right. And like, I know if we have a pitch for a show or somebody wants to collaborate with us, that's me. Or if we need to do a partnership with another brand, that's Jade. Right. So we had clear responsibilities. And while you don't have to be an incorporated business to do that, it's great to make sure that you have that in a sort of digital notebook saying, okay, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm responsible for.
A digital notebook, like some sort of Apple product?
No, I mean like OneNote.
Oh, okay. Anyways, actually, I wanted to add on to this because I'm not part of this board, or I'm not C-level and things like that. Like, I'm an individual contributor to the team, and from my perspective, this organization actually helps me feel a little bit safer. It actually allows me to engage in a lot more committed ways because I know that there's a system in place. So if heaven forbid something were to happen on a stream and I wanted to like go through an escalation path, although I don't know exactly what it would be, I know there's a structure in place for it. So now I can, feel free to express my opinions, which is the value I bring to Asians Represent, but also know that I'm protected. And, when Asians Represent actually moved to like a corporation, like an LLC, this was actually a really nice thing for me as an individual contributor to hear and know, even though it wasn't, as Agatha said, not sexy. Like, it wasn't like there's value in being like, oh yeah, we're a scrappy startup, blah 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 blah, and like I get that, I super get that, but that only gets you so far in today's world, And the fact of the matter is, when you're going to work on a team, clear expectations. Having a session 0, for example, from a business standpoint, is actually exactly what you need. Session 0
is a scam.
Session 0 is not a scam. It's also not super sexy, but it brings so much value to your group that missing it, I think, is a huge opportunity missed.
Okay, so I see gotten a ping from Mahar that we have 35 minutes left, and do we want to open up questions to the floor? What do we think? Or do we have more things that we want to share?
I'm cool opening questions to the floor.
I don't know. I'm super shy.
Get out here, Steve. Okay, so if you have questions, go to where Mahar is walking right now, which is that chicken booth.
The cock stand.
It's a chicken booth.
The cock stand.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Oh my god.
Hey, Mahar.
Hi, sorry, I was in a private space, but you heard me screaming because you're, of course, all here. So so if anyone has questions, feel free to go where my sprite is right now, and then we'll also forward any questions from from Twitch. So floor is open. Have fun.
By the way, Daniel, in the Tommy Moon cosplay, I put in these like little straps here for Muay Thai Lee Sin. It's a little callback to League of Legends for y'all.
Little callback to League of Legends and the push-up contest you should have won.
I don't want to talk about that. I talk about it so much.
I don't want to talk about it right now.
I learned the other day that my friends have a secret tally, and every time they hear me talk about this push-up contest, they put a tally, and whoever gets the most tallies wins.
Love it.
And I'm unhappy about that, but also I love it.
You have friends who are genuinely invested in what you have to say.
Okay, so this is not my question, but I don't think it's spicy, but it was sent to me privately, which is that I guess identity redacted to protect whatever. I guess they're shy about it, but here.
Sure.
You were mentioning a while ago that you have a niche that you covered because of fulfilling giving voices to Asian people or being Asian voices where there were none initially. So there are, of course, going to be other Asians who are going to want to do this. Knowing that your niche is now going to hopefully expand, how do you preserve your brand, but at the same time not gatekeep? Because after all, the niche is expanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think like the niche is certainly expanding, and there are going to be people who are going to come out and do better work than us. And that's what we want to see. But I think the one thing when you're thinking about marketing and you're thinking about, well, like I do this better than this person, why aren't they recognizing me? And I'm not saying this in a competitive way or anything. But one of the things we've also, worked on doing with Asians Represent is again, like I said, having that reactive power, having the ability to be inserted into conversations. And the reason why we're able to do that is because we in general, Asians Represent is first in mind when people talk about Asian representation in tabletop gaming, right? We might not do something the greatest, but if we are first in mind, generally that's, how you maintain relevance. And, the ability to stay first in mind also comes from your ability to create engaging, organic content and manage your community. Now, how do we evolve and how do we, sorry, Agatha, were you going to say something?
Yes, but I want to let you finish.
No, go ahead. I talk all day about this.
Okay. So that is the kind of like how do we stay relevant part. And then the other part of the question is, and also how do we uplift other creators and other communities? So a convenient thing is that is a part of our brand, which is to shout out people in different ways by interviewing them and by having them on our streams. So like, again, like our new actual play that's going to start with Jammy. Jammy's going to be GMing their game, which is Balikbayan. It's going to be on Wednesdays. So we are also, it's a huge part for us is not making for example, like Daniel or I, big. It's really, we're always excited to get more people on to showcase their own works or their own voice and their own opinions, right? Like even with the Al Qadim, right? That's Amar and like all that crew, and I don't know anything about it. So I think in that way, it's the two things are not counter to each other, because like Daniel said, in a way, because we were the first people to do this, we will always kind of have that spot as long as we keep evolving, right? So people will think like, what is like, oh, Asian representation, Asians represent. So we are already there doing that. But then a part of us maintaining our brand is continuing to get other voices onto our content. And so I don't see, first of all, I don't know if anyone else would be like, oh, I also want to make a specifically like Asian representation show. I think other people, like Asian peoples, are also amazingly creative and have their own things that you want to talk about, right? Like you would maybe like if people want to do like a Southeast Asian kind of representation thing and make your own thing, then that's not our niche, right? Like our niche is much broader, so that like everyone can continuously fill different niches because there are so many communities and so many different projects that can be done. So I don't see the two as being counter to each other at all. But I do think that it could, once more stuff are coming up, then that could foster some healthy competition as well, which would be nice because that's
and
what
I
we
think that's
want.
important because it helps us evolve. I've also been doing a lot of thinking about what we can do to improve our content, what we can do to evolve. Certainly one of the things is getting into the realm of merchandising, which we're currently working on kind of like behind the scenes. And another thing that I've been thinking about is, well, what if Asians represent, and this is a huge what if that I've talked to with James D'Amato in passing, like what if Asians Represent became a sub-network of the One Shot Network for other Asian podcasts? So there are a lot of things that we want to do to stay relevant. And I think at the core of all of it is that we need to make sure that we are still aligned with our values and we are still trying, and that means uplifting other people, creating conversation, and educating people. And if we fail to do any of those, we have stopped being relevant and we have stopped innovating. So that's why we started the wrap up. And that's why we're behind the scenes. I'm currently working on reevaluating what the podcast itself is supposed to be. If the wrap up, Asians Read, and Critical Read, and Dungeons and Asians is also on the podcast. If all of those things reach our audience and fulfill our, our beliefs, our values better than the podcast, well, we need to change what the podcast is about. So we're currently in the middle of that. What is going to be on the podcast? Is the podcast going to be more long form conversation like this? Are we going to take serious topics and put them exclusively on the podcast? That's something that we're thinking about right now. So we're constantly trying to reevaluate how we can best leverage the platforms that we are on and how we can perhaps leverage new platforms that we aren't on. So yeah, that's my long-winded answer to that question, Bar.
I'm going to add in one more thing, and it's that I liked how the question was posed and that it's not a zero-sum game when it comes to representation. The space is not limited. It's not that the more space Asian represent takes up, the less space there is for others. That is a very old school business way of thinking things, and I encourage people to deconstruct that because it's not taking pieces of a pie, it's making the pie bigger. What I mean by that is that the niche that Asian Represent does fill will continue to evolve. But as we do that, because of the way we go about doing it, because we care so much about the community and we want to do it ethically, we will always do our best to make the pie bigger as we go. And of course, any other creator out there, I think, would feel similarly. That said, the niches that exist out there are infinite. There are so many places where you can fill that space. There are no bounds whatsoever. As niche as it may feel, you absolutely can fill that, and you can make beautiful, beautiful things. And just to prove that, here's a whole bunch of niches that I don't think are being filled based on my research. There are no all Asian romance podcasts. So if you want to talk about Asian representation in romances for a full Asian podcast, doesn't exist. If you want to talk about wuxia and like that's your thing, and you want to like do wuxia, that doesn't exist. Just fucking do that.
Not for Asians. Not for Asians.
Not for Asians. Good point. Good point. If you just want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons and just like the Middle East and like do an actual play in like an Al Qadim like type situation, that doesn't exist as well. If you want to just, I don't know, talk about pottery, that also doesn't exist.
Whoa! I was gonna start that on Asians Represent.
Well, I gave it away, Daniel. I gave it away.
Darn.
I put the energy out in the universe, and it is no longer within your grasp.
And look, if any of you create any of those things, Asians Represent is here to uplift your creation.
Yeah, reach out to us.
Reach out. Let's get to another question. Do we have any other questions? Oh,
Sorry. Friends, you're allowed to like ask questions and just go here, but people are passing me their questions. They don't want to go.
yo, come on up and ask a
Okay.
question.
Okay.
I
They can be
want.
shy. That's
I
okay.
want to. It's totally valid, but I want to see that. I don't know if you have ever experienced that line from the mic when like no, you know where the cock stand is, and you want to like just line up to get a chance to.
Steve.
What are we gonna call it? What are we gonna call it?
No,
A
it's
mic
great.
stand. That's what you can call it.
Disagree. We'll have to agree to disagree.
It was a chicken booth. I'm pretty sure that was a
Okay,
term.
well, here's another one, which is that like there's a concern about like over niching, which is that like let's say you do find your niche and then but you don't know how to expand it. Like one person said here, I want to do an RPGC Southeast Asian kind of thing, but I don't want to be known as simply the RPGC Southeast Asian podcast. What can I do to not get limited by how people see me as just Asian? Because I have more than one identity that I want to bring forward.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what we did with Asians Represent. I mean, take a look at Asians Represent. We took what we were passionate about. Originally, it was just discussion about representation, but now we've taken that representation and we've created all of these other little niches for us, right? We're like, oh, we love D&D. And it's not like we're talking about Asian representation in D&D or other RPGs on Dungeons and Asians. We're literally just being there. We're existing in that space. We are, creating a show that features, the four of us. Well, I guess five now, actually. We got Jade, if y'all have watched the latest episode. But yeah, it's like, we've kind of expanded. We've branched off. We've rooted ourselves out from that original niche by creating content we were passionate about. So if our original niche is like Asian representation in tabletop gaming, well, we've gone into like Asian representation in Dungeons and Dragons discourse. We've gone into, actual play, but by creating content that is based on historical China. And that's like our thing there.
Yeah, I think this actually, the answer to this question would go back to what Daniel was saying before about why you want to create this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, so you're what I mean, this is also the kind of stuff that you'll probably have to figure out as you're starting out and as whatever your project evolves. But it's important to be like, okay, so is your purpose to get as many like Southeast Asian creators on as possible, or is it your own? Like, is this only about your own projects, or are you interviewing people? Because with that, there is already a lot of different opportunities that will be available, right? And again, like that is actually a very wide niche because you can do so many things with it, right? Like it's only a geographical location. You can do whatever you want, really, and it could still technically count. So I wouldn't think of it as a limiting thing, but it's just that kind of a niche is just useful to help people get an idea of what kind of thing you may be about, and then under that umbrella you can do whatever you want. So I I wouldn't think of that as the limiter, but as the avenue to which you can explore whatever you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
The thing that I would add is that the fail fast model for me has always served me very, very well. The constant way to like get feedback and figure out what you're doing and evolving with the feedback you get is difficult. It takes a ton of work, but I think if you're prepared for it, a lot of the folks out there are marginalized folks. They know what it means to like be prepared for things, be prepared for pain. Use that. Absolutely use that. Use that to your advantage. Take control and do what feels right for you. Definitely follow that gut feeling. Follow your instincts.
Yeah. Then we've got 20 minutes left. Is Ricky, are you lined up to yeah.
Hey.
What's
I
up?
was just thinking it over for a while, but I've always been kind of disconnected for a very long time from my family's, I guess, culture.
Yeah.
And I've only recently gotten back into it. I didn't get to see all of it, but when you were talking about like values and stuff and wanting to make things that you love, and I was just wondering, what could I be going wrong with inserting, for instance, Filipino folklore and culture into games that I make, even though I don't know all of it, because I'm only just now getting into that culture and learning about it as an adult.
I mean, you know what's really cool? I mean, like you and I, like our stories are really similar. Like Agatha and Steve are like, you know, y'all are in Toronto. Like I grew up in an area of Toronto in Canada called High Park, and High Park is like one of the whitest areas of the city. It's like super white,
Like fresh fallen snow. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 50 Shades of Vanilla. And like, so like I grew up rejecting like Chinese culture and like not knowing Chinese culture and speaking really badly and not wanting to eat Chinese food. And it wasn't until I was in like my 20s when I was like, wait, what the fuck am I doing? Why am I not engaging with this really cool stuff? And you know, TTRPGs and creating and doing stuff on Asians Represent have all very much been my journey to learn about my culture and share what I'm learning, right? None of us here are experts on our collective cultures. We are representations of that cultural experience, right? And so as long as you're like being yourself and doing and like sharing what you're learning and being open to learning from others who might have a similar cultural experience to you or are from that culture and have experiences you don't have, I think you can't go wrong. Right? Like, as long as you are transparent about what you're doing. And I think I've been really transparent with people that like, look, I'm not the guy to talk about Chinese culture, but you know, from my academic career and just my own, you know, personal belief system, I am somebody who wants to learn and wants to go and seek out the answers and share them, right? And that could be what you're doing, right? So as long as you're, you know, having that growth mindset, that learner's mindset, and that, you know, it's translating into your work, I don't think you can go wrong. And as long as you don't claim to be the expert on things that you're not an expert of.
I don't think I'll ever claim that, but
I think it could get problematic too if you were like, if I was like, all the Chinese stuff, I am the expert. Like that is super wrong and problematic in its own right. Right. And so as long as you're like, hey, I want to collaborate with other people who share my experiences or who can augment my experiences with their own, like I think that's another way to go.
I wanted to share this story here, Ricky, since you got to open up a little bit, and I want one of my goals working with Asian representatives to help other people feel seen in areas where maybe when I was more young, I didn't feel seen. I'm Vietnamese Canadian, and growing up in high school, I really resonated with the nickname Charlie in the Tree Line. That is actually super problematic, and it really enforced. Yeah, it's very problematic. It's very problematic. And what I wanted to do was I really wanted to fit in with like white people. Like I really wanted to like really put my skin out there and like let them just like take it and consume it so that I could like belong. And I realized that was putting down my path that was like really, really harmful to me, who I am. So I don't know if that's 100% what you were saying, but there is a lot of other folks out there, myself included, where our skin color and our ancestry, our lineage, whatever name you want to give it, it feels both simultaneously part of us, but also so far from what we can actually touch. So when it comes to trying to reclaim that, it's difficult, and it will always be difficult for people like us. But if you put your whole heart into it, you get a lot out of it. You get so much out of it, more than you could possibly imagine. So if that is something that resonates with you, I'm really happy. If it doesn't, that's okay too. And if anyone out there is listening and that is like something that helps you too, and that emotion feels similar to your experience and validates your experience, I'm happy.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have another question that is from Twitch. And
Sick.
this one, I'll just read it. What can you say to the content creators who have built a following through a channel, podcast, stream, YouTube, whatever, but had to stop for whatever reason? What's your advice to them if or when they want to get started again now that the landscape has shifted?
So like you have like an inactive account or something like that. I think it also depends on like what you did before and if you want to leverage the audience you had beforehand. If you want to leverage the audience you had beforehand, you need to really think about, well, I think you need to be really aware of the fact that you are going to have audience drop off, especially if the content you're making is going to be different than what you were doing before. You have to go back and ask yourself, okay, why am I making content again? And what is the content that I'm going to make? I don't think you should set expectations that your audience will stick with you the entire way, because that's how it is, right? So if you're starting up again, ask yourself why you're starting up, what you are going to do and how you are going to grow your audience again. And I can't stress enough that you cannot expect your former audience to be your current audience if their values don't align with yours.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's is just, I think a huge part is you have to be okay with the fact that you may have lost a lot of your audience, and that I think it seems like that might be a huge like mental or emotional barrier, which is understandable. And the feelings of like, oh, like I had this connection or I built this product, but now it's kind of like fallen apart. That is a really hard thing to overcome. So refocusing instead on like what you want to do, I think is important. And then knowing that that in the beginning, like things are not going to be exactly the same as when you left off is probably also a good like mental state to kind of put yourself in. Yeah,
it's why people will buy into why you are coming back onto your platform.
Yes.
If I could put on like business hat, just like put that.
Business Steve.
No, I hate hats. What I would do is if I were in your shoes, I would actually take a whiteboard, and when I make a Venn diagram, I would draw 2 circles of like your old audience and like your new direction. And I would very clearly try to figure out where the intersection is. Not because I necessarily want to target them, but knowing where my intersection would be, I think is very useful information. you're going to be working in very hypothetical spaces because you won't have the data to back anything of it up. But I think it's going to be a useful exercise just to understand what kind of spaces you were in, that you want to be in, and where they might overlap. So I think that would be a useful exercise.
Yeah, and of course, like you should also understand rethink about the platform that you're on. Like if you're on Twitter and you've engaged with people there and you have an inactive Twitter account and you want to grow a Twitter following, you have to think, okay, like what do people use Twitter for? And Twitter is like literally the by the minute news network. That's what Twitter is, right? It's a place where for us, people can post like positive and negative experiences with Asians Represent content. For us, it's a place where, we can literally get valuable consumer feedback. If you're on like Instagram, right, you have to think, okay, like, well, how am I going to leverage Instagram? If I'm coming back to Instagram and I want to create a TTRPG Instagram account, maybe I should delete all of my old posts that aren't aligned with that, with the values and the content I want to put out. If it's like YouTube, what do I want to use YouTube for? Am I going to take advantage of the streaming platform that YouTube has become? Right? That might also make things easier for you, because if you stream on YouTube, your streams on YouTube will automatically be uploaded as channel content. So think about the platform that you're going to be on as well. Likewise, if it's going to be Discord or Facebook, those are two great places to build community.
Yes. So we have 9 minutes left, and I think we have Yvonne.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's take
Hi.
this question.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. I kind of wanted to ask you guys a question about this is sort of a situation that I ran into. So back when kind of the whole situation surrounding your criticism on Oriental Ventures was kind of circulating around the news, and that created a whole like kind of hubbub on social media. Now I'm based in Taiwan, and most of the community that I interact with here. Hey, yeah. Taiwan is a wide meme.
Just waiting,
Okay.
waiting for Agatha to do something.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Continue.
Anyway,
Such a con moment. I love that shit.
So the community I interact with the most are all based in Taiwan, and interestingly enough, there was actually quite a bit of backlash against the potential recall of Oriental Ventures, and there was actually a lot of criticism going on about saying how it was disruptive, it was like just social justice warrior stuff, and I think to a certain extent there's probably definitely a bit of a cultural gap between basically a kind of Chinese culture that has never immigrated anywhere and Chinese culture that has immigrated elsewhere. So my kind of general question is, if you had directly received these criticisms in person, what kind of stories or experience would you have shared to communicate why you do what you do?
I think it really depends. I think certainly the pandemic and the fact that we were quarantined shielded us from a lot of that stuff. But I think that the context in which we would be meeting people to discuss that criticism is also super important. Is it, at a convention? Is it at a panel like this? Certainly, I mean, I would be strangely disappointed if everyone just completely agreed with what we had to say, because I know that, folks, in Asia view these things very differently. Like you could see that with our Al-Qadim Critical Read series, whereas Ahmed, who is a member of the cast, is actually using Al-Qadim in his home game and prepping to use it. Whereas on the stream, we talk about, why things are problematic and what things are bad. And so what I would do if somebody actually, confronted me about that, and I say confront in a non-confront, somebody approached me about this, is that I would say, like, look, like these are my opinions and I'm sharing them on my platform. If you disagree with me, I am totally okay with that. Like, disagreements are supposed to happen. But I would ask them why they decided to approach me. If it's at a con, if they were being confrontational about it, I would ask why they were approaching me about that. because I'm genuinely curious as to why someone would want to have that conversation. Why do you feel like our criticisms of Oriental Adventures are bad? And I would love to learn from that person. I would love to learn their perspectives, and I would love to, take some of their perspective moving forward into my own criticisms. And that's what we did with Oriental Adventures. It was just Steve and I shooting the shit. And then by episode 3, it was like Steve, myself, and guests. And like Mahar was one of them. And Mahar is one of the guests that people consistently talk about because Mahar's experiences were drastically different than Steve and I. Right? So what I usually do is, if confronted with criticism about that stuff, especially when it's content that I make, I like to involve the person in the conversation. I want to know, I want to know what informs their opinion, and I want to know, what they think we can do to do better. Right? Will I use that, criticism? Maybe, but I would like to know it.
I think for me, maybe it's like a more new to the space, or maybe it's like my own personal experiences. But I would first really examine the context in which it is, and I would lean heavily towards not engaging with it, if only because my past experiences have led me to believe that not engaging is probably the safer option for me. That said, I engage actually a lot.
I was about to say, Steve, this sounds very strange coming from you.
So yeah, so Daniel knows
I actually telling to not engage.
So maybe that's very telling, where it's like I'm telling people don't engage if your gut tells you not to, and yet you will see me on Twitter engaging a lot. And I hope that tells the story of, I actually take this very seriously, where I'm like, I sit there and I look at a response and I sit and I think and I feel, and I go get a cup of coffee or other beverage of a refreshing nature. And I think more, and then I decide how I want to respond to it. And oftentimes my response is always going to be kind of similar to Daniel's, a question. And it's going to be to gather context. And that thinking moment there is actually more about how someone in their position, from what I can gather and whatnot, might be asking that question, where that question affects me and the spaces around where that feeling is, especially with this context you give me, where it's someone from overseas who's like, please don't, like, your work could potentially ruin Oriental Adventures and remove it from the space. And that's going to cause me difficulties and maybe potentially harm. And, I take the time to really think about what that could possibly mean to someone else, because that is completely outside of my experience. In my experience, Oriental Adventures has only caused me harm. There's been zero value it has provided me. But my experience is not the Asian experience. And that has been a constant struggle, but a font of absolutely amazing value whenever I go back to it.
We've got 2 minutes left. Is it possible to do one more question real quick?
Oh, we can go. We can do this.
Oh, this is up to Mahar. Mahar, can we do one more question?
Oh, Mahar, I can't hear you.
We can't hear you, Mahar.
The chicken booth.
The chicken booth?
People haven't been giving me questions anymore, but I think I think right now, I think everyone is very appreciative of this talk. So if the people can hear me, can we all please press Z to applaud all of our panelists today? So this is Gather, and this is just like a way of showing appreciation. All those hearts
so
are
cute.
for you.
I'm gonna
take a screenshot.
Yeah, Daniel, you gotta dance too.
I am dancing. Well, I was taking a screenshot. I can't dance and take a screenshot.
Yeah. So press Z, and thank you so much. That is the Asians Represent panel. It's very late for you there. I also understand that you had your own show like an hour prior to this one, so you did double duty today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Mahar.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna probably go and maybe hang out in another space at the con for a little bit. Maybe play some video games while being at this con.
I'm gonna go meet some folks from Twitter who have always wanted to connect with, and also maybe get a tarot card pull for myself, because I'm into that.
Oh, where can you do
Nice.
that? Where can you do that?
I don't know, Daniel. You might have to go check that board that shows you
No.
by pressing the X
No,
button.
Daniel, all you have to do is follow Steve.
I'll just follow Steve. Yeah, let's do that. But thank you everyone for coming out and
Thank you again. That is the Agents Represent panel. We do invite everyone. Event halls A and B have 55 different designers, around 30 artists, and our publishers more than willing to share their stuff. Publishers also, some of them are there to hear your pitches if you're a designer. And we have another panel in 1 hour on getting started with your crafting. And yeah, so see you all later.
Mwah. Mwah.